Welcome to Art Jargon with the San Antonio Museum of Art. Today, we will be exploring the word canon. No, not that kind of canon. I'm talking about the art history canon, which traditionally refers to a collection of artists and artworks that are deemed to be great or have the highest quality. Sometimes, you might hear or read that a particular work of art or an artist is canonical, which just means that they are considered to be really, really, really great. And you probably already know or have at least heard of a lot of canonical artists and artworks. I'm talking Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, Michelangelo's Creation of Adam at the Sistine Chapel, Botticelli's Birth of Venus, Johannes Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring. These artists are usually considered geniuses, and their works of art masterpieces. They are the definition of the art history canon, if you will. But what makes someone a genius and a part of the canon? The simplest answer is opinion and documentation. Way back in the day, I'm talking way back, like Italian Renaissance, there were folks who wrote about certain artists and artworks that they deemed to be important and of the utmost quality. The most famous writer was Giorgio Vasari, who wrote a series of biographies titled The Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. In this series, he goes to great lengths in describing artists of his time. This is amazing for researchers after Vasari. But the downfall is that it was written with a lot of opinions and not so many facts. I mean, look at what he wrote about Leonardo da Vinci. He describes da Vinci's skill and artistry to be so divine that surpassing all other men, it makes itself clearly known as a thing bestowed by God, and that there is an infinite grace in all his actions. Vasari uses the word genius to describe da Vinci at least 5 times, and that idea obviously stuck to the point where we all know who he is and what he's done, and it's been over 500 years. Although that's not how art history works anymore, Vasari and his series became a blueprint for how art and artists were talked about. Toward the end of the 18th century, we developed more approaches and methods of how to discuss, think, and write about art and art history. And eventually, all of these writings began to formulate into what is now known as the Western art history canon. Western here meaning primarily Europe and the United States of America. Now, the weird thing is that most of these so-called geniuses are primarily white men, which has been a topic of conversation since the 20th century. Art historian Linda Nochlin questioned the criteria of the canon in her 1971 Art News article, which, ironically, has become part of the contemporary art history canon. It's considered to be the first major work of feminist art history. A famous quote from this essay is as follows: "There are no women equivalents for Michelangelo or Rembrandt, Delacroix or Cézanne, Picasso or Matisse, or even in very recent times for de Kooning or Warhol, any more than there are Black American equivalents for the same. If there actually were large numbers of hidden great women artists, or if there really should be different standards for women's art as opposed to men's, and one can't have it both ways, then what are feminists fighting for? If women have in fact achieved the same status as men in the arts, then the status quo is fine as it is." This essay was a bombshell in the art history field, and similarly, many artists were also questioning the same thing. Artist Adrian Piper wrote an essay in the 1990s titled "The Triple Negation of Colored Women," where she discusses how some of the ways that art historians remember and discuss artists can be detrimental for women artists of color. Piper isn't the only artist to confront the canon. Another famous artist to flip the canon on its head is Kehinde Wiley. Wiley is famous for his realistic portraits. Early in his career, Wiley was really interested in referencing old masters or canonical works of art. But instead of including the typical sitters for these kinds of portraits, he inserted black people into them. Look at this painting titled David Lyon. Here, he is referencing a portrait painted by Thomas Lawrence, a canonical artist who is even labeled as the greatest English portraitist of the 19th century at the museum where it's located. Notice the similar pose and stance of the figure. The way Wiley works is that he asks random folks walking near his studio to sit for him. He gives them a huge art history textbook, which is basically the Western art history canon summarized. He asks them to find a painting they like, and Wiley replicates that painting, but with his new sitter. Wiley does this because he wants us as viewers to rethink the power dynamics of the art history canon on two levels. One, he is saying that black portrait sitters should be seen as being just as powerful and important within the art history canon because usually they've been painted as an afterthought in history. And two, he is putting himself as a black artist in conversation with these proclaimed old masters and geniuses. If Thomas Lawrence can be considered the greatest English portraitist of the 19th century, then Kehinde Wiley can be the greatest portraitist of the 20th or 21st centuries. And so can many other black artists that usually don't get as much attention or memorialization in the canon. So, next time you're strolling in a museum's galleries or reading an art history textbook, think about who gets to be remembered and who gets to be considered a genius in the Western art history canon.